Panetta served as chief of staff to President Clinton. He also served as Secretary of Defense and CIA director under President Obama. Mr. Secretary, thank you. It's an honor to have somebody on who's a public servant who has some willingness to talk about what it takes. What did you make of this portrait we have here of, I said it was like a Twilight Zone episode last night where this little kid is scaring this whole town because he has all this power and they're all afraid of doing anything but please him.
Chris, I think we've known for a long time now that we have a very unusual president who is erratic and very unpredictable and obviously is pretty focused on who he is and how to basically please him. I think the book, in large measure, confirms what the press and others have been saying about the president and this White House for the last year. The problem is he's now using people from the inside, and that makes it more worrisome. But at the same time, look, the American people will ultimately judge this president for who he is.
You know, you and I have had presidents in reading our history, like FDR, who made sure he had a brain trust smarter than him. He always had real, eggheads around him. Kennedy, too, had really smart people like McNamara around him. And you were in the idea of a president, you could pick anybody you want and pick people smarter than yourselves. Trump, and I'm not knocking these people as individuals, Hope Hicks and Steve Miller, these are young people with no real background in public life. They're apparently his consiglieres. They're the ones he goes to in a fix. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this president, having no experience in Washington, no experience with politics, basically brought the standards that he used as a developer in New York. And his basic approach as a developer is that he was the one who knew everything about everything, and that he could basically tangle with anybody because he felt that he was the person who had all the answers. I think he's pretty much brought that same series of values as a developer to the White House, and that's the way he's serving as president.
Well, here's one I don't think he brought with him. Earlier this week, Axios reported that the president isn't spending as much time in the Oval Office as most presidents do. According to Axios, President Trump is starting his official day much later than he did in the early days of his presidency, often around 11. And this is largely to meet Trump's demands for more, quote, executive time, which almost always means TV and Twitter time alone in the residence. What do you make? I mean, suppose I was kidding last night. It's not the 3 a.m. phone call you worry about. It's the 10 a.m. phone call. Where's the president? He doesn't even come downstairs to meet people because he's watching Fox and Friends and God knows what else and Twittering. I don't know. Well, you've got nobody like this, I know, but go ahead.
Based on my experience, usually you set up a schedule to kind of fit the president's rhythm and make sure that he can basically do some of the things he needs to do in order to handle the responsibilities of that office. But we're looking at a schedule that, at least on paper and as reported, runs from 11 to 4:15 in the Oval Office. And my concern is that there are just too many issues that confront this president, any president, during the day. And whether or not they've worked out a way to ensure that the president is made aware of these issues in the middle of this kind of schedule is what concerns me. I just think, I understand you want to keep the president calm and cool and be able to do the things he wants to do. But he also happens to be president of the United States and commander in chief. And as a result, he has some very huge responsibilities that have to be met.
Well, here's one, Mr. Secretary. Even as South Korea and North Korea have opened up their diplomatic communications, the Wall Street Journal reports that White House officials are considering a risky approach in terms of North Korea. According to the Journal, U.S. officials are quietly debating whether it's possible to mount a limited military strike against North Korean sites without igniting an all-out war on the Korean Peninsula. The idea is known as the bloody nose strategy, react to some nuclear tests with a limited strike against a North Korean facility to bloody Pyongyang's nose and illustrate the high price the regime could pay for its behavior. The hope would be to make that point without inciting a full-bore reprisal. How dangerous would that be to humiliate Kim Jong-un by blowing up something he's just built, something that's state-of-the-art in terms of technology, nuclear technology, and hope that he won't fire all or any of his artillery on the South, on Seoul?
Well, I just think that whoever came up with that approach really doesn't understand the risks involved with the North Korean leader. First of all, it violates a principle that the president himself has talked about, which is that you don't openly talk about whatever military options you're thinking about. Obviously, this is now out in the public, and North Korea is going to be more than prepared to deal with any kind of response. Secondly, there are huge risks here. You can't just give North Korea a bloody nose and expect that they're going to hold back in terms of retaliating against the South. They've got thousands of artillery pieces, thousands of mortars that are set up that can do incredible damage to Seoul. So it's a risk that, frankly, is just one that no president has been willing to take because of the consequences. I just think this is a situation where the better course for this president is to keep the pressure on North Korea, keep the sanctions on, keep building up our military presence, develop a missile shield to protect our country and South Korea, and continue to try to see whether or not the South Koreans have been able to open up some further discussions here to talk about the nuclear threat that all of us want to deal with.
Well, last week, the president bragged about the size of his, quote, nuclear button of all things. And today he gave a thumbs up to what he called good talks going on between the North and South and Korea, though he also blamed previous administrations for handing him the mess there. Let's watch the latest shot from him.
I see a lot of good energy. I like it very much, what I'm seeing. I just spoke this morning with as you know, with the president, President Moon of South Korea. He had some really great meetings. His representatives had a great meeting. And I had some very good feedback from that. So hopefully a lot of good things are going to work out. I think it is much better to work with Russia. It's very much better having to do with North Korea, where we currently have a problem that should have never been my problem. This should have been a problem solved many years ago when it was much less dangerous. But it was given to me, along with a big mess of other things.
Well, he's so partisan. Let me ask you, Mr. Secretary, about this line he gave out today. You referred to Dianne Feinstein, your longtime colleague, and I know you respect her a lot, as we all do, who worked out there. Sneaky Dianne Feinstein. Using a term like that, sneaky, on someone who had put out to the public what's been going on in terms of this probe, this Russian probe. It just seemed to me, well, what do you think of that term? It's the kind of language we've been getting from Trump, and I think it's bringing us all down. Your thoughts?
I think the worst thing that this president does is basically tweet out his emotions and what he's thinking and using the kind of terms that he used against Senator Feinstein. It really demeans the office of the presidency, and frankly, it demeans him. I just don't see how you can conduct a presidency when one day you're sitting down with members of Congress trying to see if you can work out a resolution of some serious issues on Capitol Hill, and then the next day start tweeting names against senators who were participating in that meeting, and also beginning to denounce the very things that you tried to work out. I mean, it's that kind of roller coaster ride that I think makes most Americans very uncomfortable about how we're going to operate with this kind of president.